Coraline, based off the novel by Neil Gaiman, depicts the story of an 11-year-old girl who is bored with her life. Neglected by her parents and moving to a new house, she finds a passage which takes her into an alternate reality where everything is better. Very quickly, circumstances become very unsettling and puts Coraline in grave danger. Coraline is a very dark tale and takes a lot of storytelling techniques from very ancient storytelling forms, such as myths, fairy tales, and ghost stories, only accompanying this ancient form in the movie with use of retro analog technology, stop-motion animation. In this analysis, I will be exploring how Coraline adapts a mythical novel by Neil Gaiman to screen and how it communicates character, theme, and messages by applying it to theoretical frameworks. Firstly, colour. Colour theory explains the way in which humans perceive colour and how this can change depending on how colours are mixed with one another, and bringing together the use of science, art, and psychology. Coraline begins in the real world, establishing dreary, dark greys. Even warm pastel colours are made to look dull and lifeless. The Pink Palace has a very royal and grand name, but is represented as nothing more than an old house that hasn't received much attention and is now desolate. The colour pink we so often associate with happiness, youth, and femininity is made to look dull and worn out, flaky and forgotten. Coraline is the only truly colourful thing we see in the real world. With her blue hair, yellow raincoat and wellies, and accenting red, this triad of colours is very aesthetically pleasing and welcoming psychologically. Because her bright dynamic colour palette is so different from everything else in the world, she looks as though she doesn't belong there, which makes the shift to the other world more psychologically pleasing, lulling both Coraline and the audience into a false sense of security. To aid this, the tunnel to the other world is the first dynamic, colourful thing we see, aside from Coraline herself. When we're introduced to the other world, we can immediately see a major colour shift in temperature, tone and saturation. The kitchen is a glowing, inviting orange as opposed to a cold blue, with the only light source being an even bluer laptop screen. The night isn't grey, but it's a warm summer's night blue. The garden is full of brightly coloured and lit flowers, and Coraline's bedroom is a rich and glossy pink, purple and blue, as opposed to a greyish white. We are introduced to the other mother, being represented in deep blacks, light greys, and an accented red. A powerful ensemble, but with a hint of danger, still in keeping with a welcoming, healthy image. This accenting red quickly becomes more and more dominant in the other mother, as she and the other world become more and more threatening to Coraline. The other father corroborates Coraline's childlike wonder with a youthful orange costume, matching Coraline's bright orange pyjamas, which ideally represent her youth. When we come back to the real world, the sea of grey within the clothes shop makes Coraline's wish for brightness even more apparent, and the fact that she isn't allowed to buy the bright orange gloves she ever so wants is only representing how much this is suppressed in the real world. The colour of the other world drastically changes when the other mother begins to lose her strength. Landscapes, objects and people in the other world begin to die, quite literally, and as they do so, the world takes a complete grayscale form, helping represent that the other world is simply a world without life if the other mother, or the beldam, has no nutrients. The longer the beldam goes without eating, she gets weaker and weaker, and as she does so, as does the world she created. Everything in the other world gradually becomes an idea of what she's created, rather than a life itself. Life cannot be sustained in this world if she can't be, which the grayscale represents perfectly. Next, I will be analysing Coraline against semiotics. Semiotics explores how signs and symbols can be interpreted to express meaning through intellectual bridges and connections. There are many signs and symbols which represent the themes and messages of Coraline and which help drive the story forward in many different ways, deriving inherent psychological fear from its audience. Some of the first imagery the audience is introduced to are many witch-like symbols. There is a black cat animal accomplice, which is often associated with witches and superstition, also reaffirming the fairy tale rhetoric. Coraline is shown to be using a dowsing rod for water witching, a circle of mushrooms surround the old well, and the looking stone Coraline uses to find the ghost souls are all many ancient symbols of witching. This witching theme only helps represent the fantasy genre more, and makes the piece feel more magical and detached from reality. The well itself has many connotations. The well presents a threat of being trapped forever with no escape and eventually being forgotten about so far down in the earth. This is paralleled against the same threat that Coraline is exposed to in the other world with the beldam. If she loses her life in the other world, she will be trapped and forgotten about, with no chance of escape. There are many contrasts as Coraline moves into the other world. The sad boy in the painting dropping an ice cream in the real world is contrasted against the happy boy holding an ice cream in the other world. The jumping mice are a wonder, a good and playful thing, which is heavily contrasted against the rats that they truly are. Rats have very different attributes, such as disease, and are often recognised as bad things. Both sets of parents are contrasted against their health and beauty, as well as their relationships with one another. Dogs represent innocence and playfulness, loyalty and companionship, which is later contrasted against bats, which are largely associated with Halloween, fear and dark places. The other mother gradually gets more and more spider-like as the film goes on. Her figure gets pointy, more angular, and she gets taller, thinner, longer, and more gaunt. She starts moving in a random way, like a spider would move. Human psychology dictates that we subconsciously do not like sharp angular shapes and random movement, which is why we inherently dislike spiders. Cobwebs take over the other world, giving the impression that it is home to a spider. One of the ghost girls even says her web is unwinding.
Her web is unwinding!
Until it quite literally becomes a web, and the beldam ceases to have many human features at all. Many aspects aside from the beldam also become more bug-like. The furniture all become insects which can move on their own accord. The machine the other father uses is a bug and attacks Coraline. Babinski too moves in a completely inhuman manner, so he is only the idea of a human. With no bones or body parts, his body is simply made up of rats. The other father quite literally becomes a pumpkin, another Halloween symbol, and quite closely associated with fantasy and fairy tales. The beldam is shown to use many conduits to gain control over Coraline's life. The doll represents the other mother's eyes, using it as a spying technique, making the innocent child's doll feel threatening, combating the original stereotypical attributes of a doll, making a safe innocence feel unsafe. The fact that the other mother sews Wybie's mouth shut to prevent him from frowning shows that the other people in this world are merely the beldam's puppets, even turning his clothes into a flag to torment Coraline, and we can only assume the beldam has killed him. In the wonders the other mother creates for Coraline, there is something which feels an inadequacy in her real life, which relates to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The garden represents an act of cherishing something so it can grow. This is something Coraline is missing at home with the lack of attention from her parents. Both the circus and theatre evoke a childlike wonder and entertainment for entertainment's sake, allowing Coraline to just be a child rather than ignoring her for the sake of work. As the other world starts peeling away, this begins to happen quite literally, as the wallpaper starts peeling off the walls as the beldam no longer has a mask to hide behind. We see her for what she is, a monster. Lastly, I'll be analysing Coraline against genre theory. We can see that Coraline belongs to the genres of drama, fantasy and horror. Ultimately though, Coraline would belong to the genre of tragedy. Aristotle devised two ultimate genres, tragedy and comedy. Tragedies explored mankind at the mercy of their own flaws and fate, primarily focused on man falling from grace and social status because of greed, passion, misguided cunning, or any other human defects or weaknesses. Both tragedies and comedies were meant to teach and inform and set an example of behaviour so that an audience was enhanced, intellectually or spiritually, by an experience. In tragedies, the end of the story is when the lesson and moral resided, as demonstrated in Coraline. Coraline, through her own greed, almost loses her family, home and life, and in learning gratitude, Coraline finds a newfound love for her life. Her life itself hasn't changed, but she has. Coraline is now able to defeat the monster and win back her life. From this structure, we can see how Coraline follows a fairy tale format too, and contains numerous other elements associated with fairy tales. 1. There is a difficult mother-child relationship present. 2. The protagonist strikes a deal with her enemy. 3. There are lessons and morals to be learned, in this case gratitude. 4. There is an animal accomplice helping the protagonist on her journey. Above all, Coraline is a horror movie and a ghost story. Coraline utilises production, costume and character design to make it known that it belongs within the horror genre. First of all, Coraline utilises German expressionism, which is characterised by the use of simplified shapes, bright colours and chiaroscuro, a lighting technique famous for its use of bright highlights and deep shadows. Famously, this is utilised a lot by Tim Burton in his production design, introducing a darker, more sinister feel to his movies. As well as German expressionism, Coraline utilises grotesque imagery. By exaggerating and distorting character features, its aim is to simultaneously elicit our empathy and disgust. The result is powerful and helps exaggerate the horror within Coraline. The language in the film is also essential in exaggerating the horror. The ghost children themselves talk in very different manners as if they are all from different historical periods. This only solidifies how old the beldam is, making her existence more chilling and threatening. It almost makes her feel immortal, as if she will never die. Coraline is a film that spares no effort and really uses visual storytelling to the max. There is so much else to analyse within Coraline, but that would be a much longer essay. For now, I really hope you enjoyed this analysis of Coraline.